5 or so hours, you're going to have a kind of a life-changing experience, and you'll see the world of composition in quite a different way.
The dark, seedy underground.
Yeah.
I need creepy sound, theme music for this. Don't you think? Yeah, go ahead.
No. We have a comedian here. But no, Miss Shapiro is one of the most established composers in the nation, and she's well recognized, highly thought of. And she is one of the few composers in the nation that is what I would term a truly independent composer. She lives on San Juan Island, and her base is there. She does many things by internet. She does not hold a professorial position. She does not have an in-house composition studio. She doesn't make the primary amount of her money from teaching. She is a composer. A composer. Yeah. And she's going to instruct us and help you if you want to take that route. Learn that it can be done.
It can be.
And how to do it. So I'll just shut my mouth and turn this over to Miss Alex Shapiro.
Thank you, Roger. Roger is so sweet, and this is the voice of the experience here. It's a mutual admiration society, so I'm so happy to be with him. Yeah, this is, I think, it's Sunday, so I was thinking to myself, welcome to the Church of Abundance. That's what this is going to be. This is the Church of Abundance, because so many times, our business, our art, whatever you want to call it, our field, is thought of as being a place where everything's a struggle, everything's really hard, nobody wants what you do, you can't make any money, no. And you know what, I'm here to just say that's BS, and the BS part gets broken down with each one of us saying, no, I'm not going to accept that anymore. Those are negative beliefs, and there's no reason for that to be the case. We have more tools than we've ever had before. I'm an interesting kind of, I should think of a better term for this, the hump generation. Hump is not the best word, but nonetheless, I started out, way before internet. I got out of school, did not graduate, by the way. I've basically done everything wrong because I don't have a professorial position. I live on a remote island. I don't have a publisher. And by the way, I don't even have any degrees other than a high school diploma. How about that? So I'm all for education, obviously. I'm a big one for good education. But I actually left and started working after 3 years in Manhattan School of Music, which was a great education, but I didn't stay to get the degree. So I have done, in fact, everything opposite of what you think you have to do. But back when I was starting and launching myself into the world at, let's say, age 21, it was 1983. And that's long before, right, the intertubes and social networking and desktop publishing, right? I didn't have a computer. Can you imagine that? We didn't have computers. I mean, a few people had them, but composers didn't normally have them. We didn't have project studios back then.
Well, the Macintosh didn't come out until '84.
That's right. And I had, one of the early first ones. It was
Yeah.
awesome. And, I was a fast adopter to everything, early adopter, I think they call it, to pretty much everything that came out. And I was doing a lot of electronic stuff, and I was pretty geeky. But I say all this as background just to say, back in the day, when we had to trudge 5 miles in the snow, back in the day, we didn't have the tools to start a career and develop a career and develop a world and a community around us and get our music into it that we all have at our fingertips now. And it is, I'm just telling you firsthand, it's wildly different and it's fantastic. And I know everybody here is probably already making a lot of use of all this stuff. Okay, quick race. So first of all, is everybody here a composer? In addition, how many of you are also performers? You are, Carlos. You are, timpanist. What do you play?
Guitar.
Jim, you play guitar. Who else? Yes?
Piano.
And I'm not a performer either. Yet another thing going against me. It's really much easier to be a performer-composer. You have more opportunities, obviously. How many of you already have websites up and running? I mean, and I don't mean Facebook, I mean websites, dedicated websites. Okay. So that means 4 of you or so still need to think about that. We're going to talk about that, today. And how many of you are pretty actively using social media? Everybody? You're not. You're not raising your hand. No? Are you on it at all?
Well, I should have raised my hand actually. So yes, I am.
Yeah, but you're not really using it.
I am using it.
Oh, you are using it? Okay, okay. So everybody here is using social media, and you're plugged into your communities that way. Because that to me is just an awesome way to be making contacts and making your way in the world and allowing people, it's so three-dimensional. People can hear your music, they can see your photographs, they can see you, given the things that you choose to share and talk about online. They have a very good sense of who you are as a person, if you allow them to. And we're going to get into this part a little bit later. Actually, we are going to go deep into it, actually, about ways to use the web and how to best present and promote in the most fun, elegant, and delightful ways, as opposed to in ways that might turn people off. So we're going to get into a whole web presence thing. But anyway, all this is to say that the world we're in now has never offered a better opportunity for any artist, and especially composers, than right now, and that's only getting better and better. And I find it really, really encouraging and really striking. And everything's just there. You don't even have to get dressed. I mean, you can just sit there half naked in your, with your laptop and your cat next to you, and eating out of a jar of peanut butter or something. I mean, like the Unabomber should have had all this setup. So anyway, probably didn't. But I digress. So the first thing, what I want to just give you an overview of, like, 5 hours seems like an interminable amount of time. Fortunately, there is food involved in the middle of this, so we'll grab some lunch in the commissary. But the path I want to take is sort of a logical path of what all of us do as composers. And everybody here is my peer. You are my colleagues, okay? And all of us who are music creators, there's a logical progression. And the first thing that I want to talk to you a fair amount about has absolutely nothing to do with music, really. And it has everything to do with you. And it's the philosophy of what we do. After that, when we get done with the philosophical, the little warm and fuzzy talk I want to give you, which really sets the framework and the pace for everything else that we're going to pile on top of it, then we're going to talk about the stuff that you need to be prepared in this career. And that's a pretty pithy list of things, and we'll get into that. We're going to talk about copyright stuff. I've got a nice presentation, courtesy of Jim Kendrick, who I will tell you more about in a second. And we're going to be talking about business practices. We're going to be talking about publishing in a lot and distribution, all these things. But we have a lot of ground we can cover. And of course, web presence is part of that, social networking. But first and foremost is the sense of self-worth, is the sense of joy, is the sense of who you are and what is compelling you to share your music with the rest of the world. I'm presuming you want to share it with the rest of the world. I mean, some people compose just, for themselves, and that's great, nothing wrong with that. But I'm assuming if you're wanting to talk with me about all this stuff, you're interested in sharing your music. And, to compose is to communicate, and it's to communicate, I think, as authentically, and that's a very personal statement, as authentically from your heart and your soul and your way of absorbing the world around you artistically as you can. And that's what makes you you. And that's what means, believe it or not, you are not in competition with anybody. And that is a huge thing for you guys to think about and absorb. Because especially in schools, it tends to be, you always feel sort of pitted against things, and you hear about competitions, and you hear about panels that you're being judged for, or opportunities that a lot of people are climbing on board to scramble and get. And it's easy to kind of look at all this stuff and start to think, wow, there's a lot of competition. My attitude has always been, and this is like the happy village idiot talking to you for the next 5 minutes, 5 hours, okay? Truly, I'm wonderfully naive, but I think that has been my savior. Because I don't even give it any consideration what anybody else is doing. It doesn't bother me. And if it doesn't bother me, the only thing that matters to me is what I'm doing. And am I meeting my own own standards, which I rarely am, right? We're always striving to do better and better and better. You know, you'll find that the more composers, working composers you meet, we all kind of feel like we're frauds. Every piece, we look at ourselves and go, oh my God, how am I gonna come up with anything for this? You know, and the only thing that gets you through it is to realize, oh, well, I guess I came up with all those other things somehow, you know. I have no memory of writing, you know, any of the pieces that I write. And you will find this from pretty much every composer that I know. It feels this way. We all feel like we're completely pathetic, basically. We can't, where is the next piece going to come from? That's normal. But often I say composing is a faith-based occupation. And by that I mean you have to have faith in yourself, and you have to have the faith that in fact the muses are going to visit you again, because they have visited you in the past, and you have had performances of your music by lots of people. If it has happened in the past, it's very likely that you will in fact make your damn deadline and be able to create that piece. Even though you're staring at the blank paper or the blank computer screen, and the deadline is looming, and you're thinking, oh my God, I have no idea, you know, where this is going to come from. Miraculously, it shows up. The muses show up to work with you. I always say that. You know, I really do go to work every day, even though I'm in my house. I treat my schedule very sacrosanct, and my writing schedule. And my attitude is, you know, you can't just sit around and wait for the muses to hit. They have to show up to work when you show up to work. That's the rules. Now, I bribe my muses. You know, if they want coffee in the morning, they're getting good coffee. If they want wine at 4 in the afternoon, they're getting a nice glass of wine. If they want dark chocolate, got it. It's done. You know, whatever my muses want, I'm going to give it to them. Got to keep the muses happy. That's the motto. But if you keep the muses happy, they will show up to work, and they will sit down next to you. You know. But getting back to the self-worth thing, the muses come, of course, from your ability to welcome them in, and your ability to be open to the world around you and to the spirit inside of you. That's a very personal thing, the spirit inside of you. That's where your music comes from. And it comes from your unique perspective. Nobody writes anybody else's music. And Carlos and I were speaking before we started about how, you know, there's already, you know, Beethoven, you can say to yourself, there's so much great music out there, how could I possibly do any better? You know, there's been Beethoven, there's been Mahler, there's been Bartok, Stravinsky, you know, John Colliano, whoever you want to name, and what's left? You know, all the 12 notes have been used. And, but, you know, my attitude, of course, and my response is, well, there's never been a you, there's never been a you, there's never been a you, there's never been a me. We are the only us. Just like Mahler was the only him, you know, and Joan Tower is the only her, and so on and so on, so on. And this is what I really want you guys to think about and grasp on a very deep level, is your sense of worth as individuals, as passionate artists. I hope you're passionate about this, about what you're doing, and a sense that you have something to say that is worth the time of other people to listen to it. You are the only person that can say these things through your music, or how, you know, whatever other form of expression you might be doing too. But let's keep it simple and talk about music. You're the only person who's going to put those notes together in that order. You know, I often joke that each one of us is like a snowflake. No two are alike. And so this is the snowflake spiel, okay? You guys are all snowflakes. We're all snowflakes. I don't like the melting part, actually, but I don't want to go. No. When you think about it, that's a really important concept, and that will drown out, if you really hold on to that, that will drown out any sense you might have of panic, of competition, of feeling like, oh, there's, you know, so many other people vying for X, Y, and Z. And actually, no, there's nobody else like you vying for what you're doing. Nobody. Grasp that. And I think that is, you know, that's sort of what has led me to be a happy artist, you know, a happy person. You can be a happy composer. I'm pretty goofy, actually, as you can already tell. And, you know, I think that just comes from not worrying about all the other stuff out there. I celebrate it when my colleagues and peers do well. I want as many composers as possible, living ones particularly, to do really well in our field, because the more composers that do well, the better for all of us, right? The better for the arts, the better for the recognition of living arts and living music. And this is something to be celebrated. And none of those composers, I don't care how many Pulitzers and other prizes and wonderful things they've won, none of them is you. None of them, they write a groovy, amazing piece, absolutely, but you know, you have your own groovy, amazing piece, and it's gonna sound like you. So, you know, I'm pounding this into your head because I'm so passionate about the concept. And because I think it really does set the stage for everything else we talk about today. Everything, nothing else is worth anything if you are not really proud and thrilled, you know, about the work that you're doing. That's where it starts. And that's also where projecting that starts. You know, nobody wants to hang out with someone who's sort of a downer or somebody who's like very mousy about their work. Well, maybe please, maybe take a look at this. No. You know, you wanna when you're interacting with people, you wanna be really proud to show them what you're doing. Not in a bragging, arrogant way, obviously, but you wanna feel good about what you're creating, because you're creating something very special. I've used this analogy before, that if I asked everybody in this room right now to write 4 measures of the opening of a piano trio, let's take standard instrumentation, and then 10 minutes later you each handed me back in 4 measures, guess what? Every single one would be wildly different, wouldn't it? Right? Wildly different. Think about that. You know, same assignment, same thing, it's all snowflakes. So that the philosophy of what we do, it reaches from within us, and it also affects our sense of community and the way we are with other people. And I feel very strongly that we are part of a community, especially now being so plugged in to each other with the intertubes. We are constantly in touch with each other if we would choose to be. And the world has become a very, very small place. And that's a wonderful thing. It also means, I think, that there is a civil responsibility, if you will, to be a good citizen of the world and be a good musical citizen and be a good compadre to your colleagues, to be supportive, to be encouraging. Again, this falls back into, well, you can be all these things. If you don't feel competitive, suddenly your heart becomes 100 times bigger. And suddenly you become somebody in the community that is a real asset to yourself and to everybody around you. And that ends up having a really nice byproduct of, if you're a warm person and encouraging everybody else, people are going to want to kind of hang with you and, you know, listen to what you do. It's a really nice reciprocal thing. That's not the reason to be that way, but it happens to be a nice fringe benefit. That being part of a community is, in my experience, it's been a huge thing in my life that really plugged me in. And I'll give you a little backstory to give you an example. I actually did not start, I started out doing concert music, and I grew up in New York City. I was very, very, very lucky to get a terrific music education, and also I had very hip parents that just let me, I was an only child and I had the run of the city from a very young age. And so I spent my childhood, like from age 12 and 13 on, hanging out at the Village Vanguard and Carnegie Hall and Alice Tully and the Met and all the dance companies, Alan Ailey and the Joffrey and ABT and everything, musical theater, jazz, rock, CBGBs, all this, all by myself, because my parents didn't go to this stuff with me, and most friends, how many geeky 14-year-olds want to go to the Met Opera? Not many. So I was lucky to be growing up in the 70s, in New York City, which is beyond incredible. And of course at the time I thought, well, doesn't everybody do this? It didn't occur to me that this is actually not normal. But I grew up with all this kind of music and all these ways of expressing myself and of learning to express myself and just loving every kind of genre equally. And I had lost my train of thought. I was just saying something right before the New York thing, the backstory. There was a reason I was talking about this. There's Alzheimer's and then there's Somezheimer's. No, but there was a train of thought that I had.
How you got got to where you are?
Yeah, there's a reason that I wanted to bring this up, because okay, yes. Aha, back on the train, thank you, Austin. The train has now returned to the station. I wanted to tell you this because it's relevant. I started out in New York going to Juilliard pre-college, and then from pre-college I went to Manhattan School of Music, and before that I did, Aspen, and I had other summer opportunities, and it was really great, all composition, because I started composing when I was really short, when I was 9, and I knew by the time I was 15 that this is what I was going to do, this is what I wanted to do. And probably because I wasn't good enough to do anything else, so it's a default position. So I started out, when I left Manhattan School of Music in 1983, one of my teachers, I was the student of 2 people, Ursula Mamlock, who is a renowned, she's still alive, she just turned 90 this year, and she's an amazing person and an amazing composer. And she is a renowned former serialist. She was a student of Shapiro and Volpa. And then she, in her later years, moved away from serialism and just writes really fascinating and beautiful music. And then also John Corigliano was teaching at Manhattan School of Music at the time, but this was obviously before he went to Juilliard. And I studied with him as well, and that was life-changing. The 2 of them couldn't have been more different from each other. But John, when I was studying with him, he had just come back from scoring Altered States in Hollywood. And I will always remember sitting down with him and him opening up his conducting score from the session at the scoring stage. And we were poring over it together. And of course, as Shaw said, I'm paraphrasing, George Bernard Shaw said, youth is wasted on the young. And he's absolutely right, because of course I'm sitting there with John looking at this score, and there were probably a million questions I should have been asking, and I think I probably asked stupid questions or whatever. But it was a memorable experience. He has no recollection of this at all, I'm quite sure, but for me it was one of those great moments. And he was, of course, very encouraging about the film and TV world, and I was starting to explore that because also at Manhattan School of Music there was a guy named Roy Eaton who is also still with us. He's not a spring chicken, and he's a gifted pianist and composer, and he at the time was the head of the music department for a big ad agency in New York called Benton and Bowles, which is no longer. They've been absorbed by something else. And he actually gave a class, believe it or not, in 1981, 2, 3, in scoring a picture, which, again, conservatories didn't offer this kind of thing. There wasn't this kind of normalcy to this that there has slowly begun to be now. So I took it. I was one of 5 people, I think, that took his class. And I learned click tracks, right? I learned scoring to picture. I learned all the basic stuff he taught us. And then I started sitting in. He would produce sessions in New York, and he invited me to go to the jingle sessions and stuff. And I'd watch the great players, Will Lee, from David Letterman, all that. These are the guys. I would go to these sessions and learn by observing what it was to work in that part of the industry. And so I ended up, one thing led to another, and I ended up going directly into the commercial music industry, because I figured, and I was right at the time, that in 1983, the kind of music I was writing, which was neither, aleatoric, Columbia University, Princeton kind of stuff, nor was it the downtown minimalist scene. I was sort of, I joke, I would say I'm a midtown composer, I was just sort of, I wrote all kinds of stuff, and none of it fit into any particular clique, and I didn't have any ins with any cliques in New York. It just wasn't, I hadn't learned the art of socializing and becoming part of a community back then. And so I had an opportunity to come. I was scoring some low budget documentaries in New York, just direct-to-cable things, and for cable TV. And then I had a chance to go to LA and work on a very low budget direct-to-video thing. And I took that opportunity with John's blessings. He said, "Great, go to Hollywood, do that. That's going to be great." And I did. And so for 15 years, I didn't write a note of concert music, not one note. I only wrote film and TV scores, mostly very low budget, off the radar stuff, but kept me working. I did corporate videos. I did CD-ROM projects. This is before the internet. There were CD-ROMs. We used to put music on the CD-ROM. People put the CD-ROM into their computer and click places, and music would come up. I mean, this is so old school. It's hilarious to talk about it. But that was actually, pretty cool technology at the time. And this was all what happened right before the internet, and everything went live, and suddenly you could click and interact, over the web. I just think it's amazing where we have come so fast. I sound like I'm about 93 years old when I say that. But, but it's true, I never lose my sense of awe. I have a state-of-the-art studio in my house, just like I'm sure a lot of you guys have really groovy digital studios. And I never lose my sense of awe of thinking, wow, 25 years ago, I was calibrating a 2-inch machine and splicing tape on a splicing block, trying to get edits and, cleaning tape heads, all this stuff. But I hadn't written any concert music at all, none. And decided after a film that I had done, that was all chamber, it was a small orchestra I had, and it was a live gig, no synths on the gig, which was great. And because most of what we do is, in film and TV and samples. And it was a union gig, it was just terrific, low budget, but it renewed, this was in the mid-90s, and it really renewed my love of why I became a composer. It reminded me, this lovely Disney-like, film with this chamber score, reminded me what I loved so much about composing, because I had started to lose track of that as I was churning out lots and lots of just tracks and being the chameleon that is best to be, writing in a lot of different styles for very commercial projects. And that made me decide, wow, I think I really want to do this. I think I want to focus on concert music and chamber music in particular. And this happened at a time when the industry in LA was changing tremendously, and not for the better. Things really started to go downhill in LA, and for those of you interested in film and TV, we can talk a lot about that. And I won't be always negative about it. I just want to give you the background, that the 90s were a challenging time, and the business end of it was not always so fun. The ethics involved with some of the producers and directors and people that I was, coming across and working with were not of the highest caliber, and I was getting, very dismayed, just thinking, I feel like a round peg in a square hole, or round square peg in a round hole, or whatever. I was a parallelogram. I don't know. Whatever I was, it wasn't fitting, and increasingly, I was just finding that I was in my heart, and this is an important lesson, in my heart I was at odds with the work I was trying to do. I was trying to be a successful film composer, but I was really having issues with the people that around me, and the way that business was done. I have no problem at all, by the way, about scoring to picture and serving the vision of a director. It's a very different thing than writing concert music. That I'm fine with. That's the art of film scoring. Is you're a psychologist, and it's not about pleasing you, it's about serving the picture and serving the desires of the people who've hired you. That's fine, and then you have to have the right mindset. But it was just, the creepiness of some of these people were driving me a little bonkers. And so I had this great experience, and I decided, okay, you know what? And on the heels of that, by the way, I was hired on 3 low-budget films. They were like $5 million pictures, and each one of them, just as I had started in on post-production, they lost their financing. And each one of them, this happened 3 times in a row, and I thought it was like a sign from the universe, because I went for 9 months without working, which in LA, that's 9 months without working. That's not because I had cleared my schedule and gotten these gigs, and each one fell through. And I thought, okay, that's it. It can't get any worse than this. It cannot get worse. So the only way to go is up, meaning do what you want to do. What do you want to do, Alex? And I actually made lists of what I wanted to do, and lists of what I was good at, that I loved, what I loved that I wasn't good at, I have to be brutally honest, what I was really good at that I didn't love, and then down the line, I'm a Capricorn, I just made these very organized lists. And I figured, and I just realized, even though on paper it would seem ludicrous and laughable that someone would say, I'm going to be a chamber music composer, and I'm going to make money doing that. I mean, that sounds absolutely ludicrous. But that's what I decided, and I decided, you know what, take the money out of the equation, don't worry about whether it's going to support me, and follow my heart. It's a cliche, but you know what, it's true. If you follow the path, and each one of us has something very unique to us that is our path, and and it takes a little while to find it. You may not find it this year. You may find it when you're older. I was 37 when I found it. That's not a spring chicken. you know, for me, and that was a big leap of faith to say, I'm done. I called my agent and I said, I'm not doing gigs anymore. I'm done. I'm gonna really focus my time on chamber music. I made a very definitive decision that I wanted to do the thing that made me happiest, where I felt I had the most to say, and where I could be autonomous. I think I was tired of being at the whims of other people's businesses. You know, their business falls to crap and suddenly I'm out of a job, right? And of course, being at the whims of other people who have other people in their spheres that maybe aren't the nicest people, that you don't necessarily want to hang with or work with. I was just sort of done with that, and I made a very definitive decision to say, you know, I could totally fall on my ass by doing this, but when you're already on the floor, falling on your ass is actually not a problem, okay? Been there, done that, there you are, you're on your ass already. So, you know, and it's sort of like, in a sense, it's the same thing of when you're in school and you start. The only way to go is up. You know, when as you're all starting, the world is your oyster. You can do anything. You can make any decision you want. There are no rules, and that is it. It's terrifying, but it's joyous. It's both things at once. So I followed my heart, and so what did I do? I did not know anybody in the concert music world. That was not my scene. I wasn't even going to contemporary music concerts. I mean, I really wasn't. It was not my scene. I wasn't hanging out and doing that. But I had plenty of time on my hands since I was gainfully unemployed. And so I was sitting down each day and I was writing chamber music. I found any opportunities with friends of mine, you know, really great session players who also do concerts, to write for them for free, obviously. You know, like I had no credit. I had no reason to have anybody pay me. And I started writing some standard chamber music, you know, whether it's a piano sonata or I remember a trio for clarinet, violin, and piano, you know, very standard stuff, nothing too wild, you know, 3 tubas in an ocarina. I did not do that to start out with, because I figured, you know, it'd be harder to get performances. So I started, this is where we come into community, which is what started this whole long thing about 15, 16 minutes ago, when I was talking to you about community. And I tell you all the backstory for this reason. The way I plugged in and started getting my music out there was very much because of community, very much because of plugging in. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. I lived in LA for a total of 24 years, from '83 to 2007. And that's when I moved up to San Juan Island. And it was my dumb luck, good common sense of deciding to join advocacy organizations, composers forums, and group we had at the time, a Southern California Composers Forum. That kind of went by the wayside eventually, but American Composers Forum, which you probably all know about, had sprung up, and that had been active in Minnesota for a long time. But then they also began a chapter right around the time that I was getting active in the community in Los Angeles, and I ended up getting very, very active in that chapter. I was president of it by the end of all this. And I joined the College Music Society, I joined SCI, I joined NACUSA, I joined every organization that had anything to do with advocacy for what we all do on the concert music side. Just as when I was pursuing film and TV stuff, I was very active with the Society of Composers and Lyricists, which is a film music artist thing. Yeah?
Yeah, so that's an interesting moment when you've given up one career and you're moving blindly into another career.
Very blindly.
How did you pay your bills during that transition?
That's a great question. I had some savings because I had some better paying gigs.
From your LA?
From my LA stuff. I had some savings. I had about $500 a month passive income that was coming to me, and I kept my expenses down. And fortunately at the time I was living with somebody, and so my expenses were in half that way. Throughout my life I've been single, I've lived with people, I've been all up, up, down. So, and that affects our finances, because one of the things we're also going to talk about today, guess what, is money, and managing, dealing with money. Because we never talk about that enough, right? Everybody's like, oh, we don't talk about money. We're talking about money. Okay? Warning. It's very important to talk about it, because it shouldn't be a secret. But that's a great question. Yeah, I lived frugally is what I did, because suddenly I didn't have much income. So, but I was able to I was very lucky, because kind of things collided, and this is sort of where a lot of this talk comes from, in my own experience of what worked for me. I was not a spring chicken. I was reinventing myself. I had no connections. So it was basically like being dropped from another planet and, you know, like an egg splitting open when it hits the ground. Like, here I am, hello. You know, that's what it was. I had nothing, I had no connections at all, which some of my friends would find laughable now because I do know a lot of people now and I'm very involved on a national level. But, and I have an amazing number of friends in this business now. But 15 years ago or whatever it was, no, I didn't know anybody. So take faith, you know. But guess what happened around the same time? This was right hovering around the year 2000. This was the late 90s into 2000. Let's say 98, 99, 2000. This is when all this was going on by this time. And that also happened to coincide with the advent of the internet. Suddenly that's when the internet really became a happening place. And most composers still didn't have websites, even in 1999. But I figured it out kind of quickly that, wow, this looks like a really great way to showcase one's works, because you can put up an MP3 file and people can hear what you do. Wow, what a concept. Amazingly, a lot of composers, even if they were on the web, they didn't have audio clips open. They didn't have a few pictures here and there. They didn't have anything that tied you in to who they were. And then this all happened organically. American Composers Forum, which I really recommend that you each join. It's really worth joining. It's the only membership-based organization of the national ones, because now New Music USA, which is an incredible organization, you don't have to be a member, you don't have to pay to be a member. The grant opportunities are open to everybody. And we're going to talk in more depth about various organizations, because as you might guess, I'm very involved with a bunch of them. So I want to share my thoughts with you. But American Composers Forum, which is composersforum.org is the website. I think it's $55 or $65. I know that's a lot of money. It's worth it. They're a good group, and it's worth being in their sphere and being supported by what they do. They have a lot of opportunities, and it's a good community. When I started plugging into these different organizations, and not just as a member, but very importantly, I started volunteering. I started spending my time, since I had some time, gainfully unemployed. I volunteered my time, and that plugged me in the most wonderful way to other people, you know, doing what we do, and to a structure, especially in a place like Los Angeles, which is so vast, and there's no there, right? It's up to you in any community, even a small one like Bellingham or smaller yet Friday Harbor. It's up to us to create our community, but boy, does that become the case in a huge city. Any huge city, you really have to get out there and form your own group, and the best way to do that is getting out there online, plugging in, as many of you do, and also in person. Online is not a substitute for in person. It's an amazing thing, and I do a great deal of it, but showing up in person is very important.
But you're not the only composer on your island, right?
No, there's several other composers. One of them is very well known. Morten Lauritsen is a dear friend of mine, and he lives part-time on San Juan Island. He's lived Gesundheit. He has had, for 30 years, a place on Waldron, remote little Waldron. He's exploding! and he's still in LA part-time now, as he's wrapping up his many years at USC. And he's one of my closest friends, and he's on San Juan Island now, part-time. So that's really great to have him there. And there's a young man, Grisha Krivchenya, who is a delightful guy. He's a terrific composer and pianist who's about your age, going through in and out of school stuff. Very talented. Went to Oberlin and now is looking for a grad program. So anyway, there's I wouldn't say there's a lot of high culture on San Juan Island, though. I mean, it ain't Lincoln Center. Let's just put it that way. So the community thing. In LA, it was obviously a lot easier than San Juan Island. I mean, I wouldn't recommend to someone just starting that they move to a remote island. I would say it's possible. You can absolutely do it and make it work for you, but it's not the most ideal thing, because if you live on a remote island, you're going to be missing out on the group hang thing and developing the relationships in person that are going to sustain you. Now, a huge substitute for that, it was an addition when I was living in LA, and now I continue to do it, and it's a substitute. And very important to my business is I go to conferences, and I want to recommend to all of you that you could show up at conferences. And there is a conference for everything, as you guys know. I mean, if you're into chamber music, there's Chamber Music America every January in New York. If you're into band music, oh boy, can I tell you about all the band conferences, because I'm very involved in that world now. If you're into flutes, there's the National Flute Association Convention, which is a huge thing. All these wacky flutists running around, you know, it's fantastic. There's PASIC, which just happened, right? You know, yeah. Were you there?
No.
You should have been there, right? PASIC, it's great. Drummers are the coolest. Percussionists are the best. I used to live with the percussionists. I think they're great. Anyway, there are, these conferences it's like summer camp for music geeks. It's fantastic. Every time you show up, and it's like there's already this subset of people, whether it's 500 people, or in the case of the Texas Music Educators Association, at which I'm speaking in February, 30,000 people. From 500 to 30,000, you're all there for the same reason. Think about that. You're all there because you're passionate about music and about the kind of music that you're doing. I mean, just think about it. It's very specific, band music or flute music or oboe music or whatever it is. And that's a very wonderful thing. It means that even if you're shy, and most of us are, I overcompensate for being shy by being very extroverted, but I am very introverted on the inside. I'm very shy. And even if you are hesitant to put yourself out there, it's a very warm and fuzzy and friendly thing to go to these conferences where people smile at you and they welcome you to the stuff, and there's workshops and all kinds of things you can go to, and you raise your hand, maybe make a nice statement or ask a question, and suddenly people see who you are and they notice you and they've heard you and they come up and talk with you afterwards. Or maybe you do as I did at Chamber Music America and you exhibit your wares. You really take a big leap of faith, and you spend a few extra bucks for a table and you exhibit your wares. This is how I plugged in. This is how I did it. I got involved in organizations. I showed up at concerts, again, in LA. That was easy to do. And I would go backstage, assuming I liked the players were doing. I'm not going to fake it. I'm not going to go up to somebody who didn't do a good job or was playing just dreck, and say, oh, that was fabulous. I don't do that. I am not a phony. But for the things that I thought were just wonderful, which was most of it, I'd go backstage and introduce myself with a big smile. I still am a nobody. I was totally a nobody then. I had no credits, no catalog, no nothing. I was just a nice person who really appreciated what they did. And we all know this, those of us who are performers, or any of us as composers, after you get a piece done and somebody comes up to you and says, thank you, that was really great, I dug it. Everybody loves and appreciates having somebody come up to them and say, thank you, that was wonderful, thank you for performing that or writing that or whatever. We tend to be a little shy about approaching people, but if you do it in a very genuine and gracious way and friendly way, there's no reason to be shy about it. Now, do not shove a CD and business card in their hand as you're doing it, okay? Right? And I've seen people do that. We've all seen that. Don't do that. Never, never, never. But what happened with what I was doing in LA, and so many of these people became really great friends of mine, is, I'd go backstage, and of course there's usually the hang, like, oh, we're going across the street for a glass of wine, come join us, that kind of thing. And so you become friends with people. And as they become comfortable with you as a person, they hadn't heard a note of my music, but as they become comfortable with you as a person, as a fun, nice, friendly person who's part of a group and supportive, then they're interested in your music. I mean, imagine that, We as artists, or as artistes, we tend to want to think that, everything's about our music. They should just love us for our music. They should just want the music for the music. The real world is a little different, and I know you guys know this.